Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. This show is going to be short. It's going to be rather quick. I just want to flag something. I have other shows on the agenda, but I saw this and thought it was interesting. So, do you remember this? Let's see, right here. Yeah. Do you remember this? When Donald Trump first took office and everyone was wondering, what is he going to do? Like, oh my God, this maniac has won the presidency. He beat Hillary Clinton, beat the stuffing out of her. But what is he going to do in the office? He has no political experience at all. He's a reality show host. What is this reality show host going to do to the presidency? And there was a minor hope among lefties, like a tiny glimmer of hope, that because he wasn't beholden to anybody in this way, that he would do something different. He got in that office and he became a regular Republican president. Now, part of the thing that gave you the heads up that he was going to be just a regular Republican president were the people that he put into the office. Now, by regular Republican, I just mean rapacious, unempathetic, militaristic. But we have this idea that maybe he sounds like he wants to be conciliatory towards Russia. Maybe, at the very least, he will stop the military conflicts that we've been having. Or at the very least, bring them back, pull them back. At least get us out of Syria. Something. The other person who was running against said she was going to put air defense shields in Syria. She was going to start a nuclear war. Now, Donald Trump wanted to be conciliatory towards Russia, so we were hoping that at the very least that would be a positive attribute of his presidency. He started putting comic book villains in those slots. Meaning Department of Defense, Education, meaning Betsy DeVos, head of the EPA, somebody who's literally suing the EPA. And if the Secretary of State, a name I had never heard before, Rex Tillerson. Now, in this position, Rex Tillerson apparently was an oil man. And the first thing they said, they screamed, oh my God, he put Rex Tillerson into Secretary of State because of Russia. He has no experience as Secretary of State. The only reason Donald Trump will put him in Secretary of State is because Vladimir Putin wants that guy in Secretary of State. Oh my God, this is evidence of collusion with Russia. If you don't believe me, take a look at Rachel Maddow. She's a liberal firebrand.
It's a very far north place on Earth. We think of places like Sweden and Finland being very far north. Further north from there, parts of Siberia in Russia. Further north from Siberia is the Kara Sea. Kara Sea is home to the northernmost oil discovery in the world. In 2014, the Russian government-owned oil company Rosneft, they drilled a well up in the Kara Sea, or at least they decided a well should be drilled there. It was actually Exxon who provided the rig. That was the product of a joint partnership. In 2012, Exxon CEO hammered out this with Rosneft. Basically, it was the mother of all oil deals. It put Exxon and Rosneft into a joint partnership deal to drill the Kara Sea, to drill elsewhere in the Arctic, to drill the Black Sea, to drill Siberia. That deal that Exxon CEO Rex Tillerson hammered out with Russia in 2012 is thought to be the biggest oil deal ever. Vladimir Putin said at the time it was likely to be a $500 billion deal, a $500 billion deal. They did that deal in 2012. Following year, 2013, Putin bestowed upon Rex Tillerson the Order of Friendship, Russia's highest award that they give to a non-Russian citizen. The year after that, 2014, victory in the Kara Sea, literally victory. Victory is the name they gave to the well that they drilled in the Kara Sea. That was fitting because they really hit pay dirt with that first well. That first well, they said, was capable of producing 750 million barrels of oil, just that one well. Overall in the Kara Sea, based on their initial exploratory work, they said they think the Kara Sea holds nearly 90 billion barrels of oil, which is way bigger than even Saudi Arabia's biggest oil fields. But that initial well in the Kara Sea in 2014, that was both their greatest victory and the end of it all. Because right after they drilled that well and hit oil, right? They thought they could get 750 million barrels of oil just out of that one well. Right after they drilled it, right after they made that announcement, boom, sanctions from the U.S. government on Russia, including on Rosneft specifically, and individually on the guy who runs Rosneft. Sanctions as punishment for Russia invading Ukraine and taking Crimea. Can't do business with those folks in Russia anymore. And that stopped that giant $500 billion Exxon oil deal in its tracks.
Just to interject something here, because she says, I'm always amazed with the sanctions thing. I don't quite get it. Like, I'm always astounded by that, because it would imply that there's something that's higher, or something that can preside over somebody else. Like, it assumes that there's some kind of authority in the situation that can apply sanctions in that way. That's so bizarre to me. And she says it like, yeah, you got sanctions for invading the Ukraine. The Ukraine is the neighbor of the country. It's in our political sphere. I'm not saying they should invade it. I'm just saying we've invaded countries left and right. There have been no sanctions on the United States. It's bizarre to me that we get away with this. Let's keep going. I'm sorry. I don't mean to interject. I'm always just blown away by the concept of the sanctions. Don't get me wrong. I understand what they're for and understand what they're used for, but I don't understand how they're used in this kind of piecemeal way. The U.S. puts sanctions on some of anybody, and puts sanctions on people for doing the exact same things that the United States does. We can invade Iraq. We can invade Libya. We can invade Somalia. We can invade all these countries. No consequence. We have military in 70% of the world. No consequence. We kill 1 million people. No consequence. We kill thousands of civilians. No consequence. We haven't even declared war, meaning we're in these countries illegally. This is a magnificent tangent. I'm sorry. I just always get blown away by the sanctions thing. Let her finish. And it's like we're blaming Russia for this. You're doing the same thing that you're blaming them for, and yet you're putting sanctions on them. Let's keep going.
Nobody has drilled in the Kara Sea since then. Although you can see the Russians are getting antsy about it. In February, the Russian state-owned gas company, Gazprom, tender looking for tugboats and a passenger vessel to try to put another rig out there to at least drill for gas, even if Exxon can't come back out there and drill for more oil. Well, Exxon wants to get out there and drill for more oil. Today in the Wall Street Journal, we learned that Exxon is applying to be exempted from the U.S. sanctions on Russia, specifically so they can restart that oil drilling with Rosneft. Only now it's not Rex Tillerson, Exxon's CEO, who's doing the asking. Now it's Rex Tillerson's successor at Exxon doing the asking. And the person he's asking is Rex Tillerson, because Rex Tillerson is now the U.S. Secretary of State. Tillerson will personally have to recuse himself from direct say over this decision because of his continuing financial ties to Exxon. But it's an eye-popping development, right? I mean, not least because of the mega amount of money that's involved here, but also because of the unexplained coincidences and eventualities here. I mean, it's still not totally clear how Rex Tillerson ended up being Secretary of State, particularly since he and Donald Trump had never met before the November election. All the other people whose names were floated for Secretary of State made much more sense from Trump's perspective, right? I mean, former political rivals who he might want to bring into his camp, like Mitt Romney. People he'd seen on TV, like John Bolton. Old friends, like Rudy Giuliani. Or Rex Tillerson, who Donald Trump had never met, had never had anything to do with before, had never laid eyes on before the election. How did Rex Tillerson get that job? He must have come very highly recommended by someone. But if Rosneft and Exxon could please start drilling again.
You get her implication. You get her implication. The only possible reason that Donald Trump would have hired Rex Tillerson is because Vladimir Putin asked him to take that position. Otherwise, what other reason could Donald Trump would have had to hire Rex Tillerson for this position? I mean, it hasn't been Vladimir Putin, right? That oil, they wanted that oil deal. Now, Rex Tillerson is out. And now the question is, by libs and Democrats, did Trump fire Tillerson because he was too anti-Russian? Is that the reason? Beforehand, it's Trump hires Tillerson because of Vladimir Putin. The Russians got Trump to hire Tillerson. Now it's, did he fire him because it's anti-Russian? All sorts of people now are on Twitter and Facebook and the web saying that Donald Trump fired Tillerson because he was anti-Russian. Let's take a look at the first part of the article. About 13 hours before he was fired, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson issued perhaps the toughest comments to date on Russia. He said that a nerve agent used on a former Russian spy in Britain last week clearly came from Russia. How is that clearly? He also said Russia, an irresponsible force of instability in the world, acting with disregard for the sovereignty of other states and the lives of their citizens. That is utter hypocrisy. That is absolute hypocrisy. Are you shitting me? How do they say this stuff with a straight face? How do they say this with a straight face? I'm sorry. Yes, this is a tangent. I don't understand how they say this stuff with a straight face. How? Put it in context. Understand what I mean when I say what I'm saying. We just taking Iraq. We invaded Iraq. We smashed that country to bits. That was an actual country. Yes, it was a repressive government. Saddam Hussein was not a nice guy by any stretch of the imagination. But we smashed that country to bits. They were not terrorists in Iraq. Before we got to Iraq, we destabilized that region of the world. And breaking Iraq into that many pieces, their troops and soldiers and military went through all other regions, all other countries, fomenting the basis of ISIS. Now, this is not, you can even take it earlier when you go to this idea of Afghanistan. We're giving forces, arms and weapons in Afghanistan for a proxy war against the Soviet Union, dragging them into their own Vietnam of sorts in Afghanistan itself. Those people were being radicalized, becoming these fighters, which eventually ended up being weapons used against the United States. We're destabilizing that region of the world with our behavior in that region of the world. We smashed that country to bits. The country and the territory that ISIS took in areas of Syria and area of Iraq. You understand that the refugees that were fleeing into all of those other countries, they were fleeing war zones. Libya, Somalia, we destroyed those countries. Like, I'm trying to get across this idea of what he's saying is absurd in comparison to what the United States does. It's massive hypocrisy. If you're even talking about this thing of Syria, all of this talk right now about Syria, I have a story coming up with the guy saying the West doesn't care about Syria. No, the West doesn't care about Syria. And the reason why the West doesn't care about Syria is because it puts arms and weapons and military into Syria. Now, we have troops in Syria. We pay weapons and munitions to terrorists to undermine the government of Syria. This is us. We're destabilizing that region. Do you realize all of the refugees that were fleeing Syria and all of those people fleeing in boats ended up in Europe, destabilizing Europe? The politics of all of those European countries, whether you want to talk about Germany, whether you want to talk about London, whether you want to talk about Amsterdam. Or not Amsterdam. Oh, what's the country? What's the country? It's near Portugal. I think it's Portugal. Well, whatever. Those European countries that were receiving all of those refugees by the boatloads, by the thousands, their politics were being augmented with refugees, meaning the people in those countries were having a reaction to having a lot of people coming in from different cultures and different ways of looking at the world. But for all intents and purposes, they were trying to be hospitable for people coming from war-torn countries. The politics of those countries shifted as a result of what was taking place in the Middle East. What was taking place in the Middle East in large part happened because of what the United States was doing in that region of the world. They are not the destabilizing force on the planet. We are. This is massive, this is massive fucking hypocrisy. That's all. Let's keep going. I'm sorry. This is a tangent. It was perhaps his last major act as Secretary of State, but it was the reason for his dismissal or even a last straw. Just to be clear, 13 hours before he was fired as Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson issued perhaps his strongest comments to date on Russia. He said that a nerve agent used on a former Russian spy in Britain last week clearly came from Russia. He also called Russia an irresponsible force of instability in the world, acting with an open disregard for the sovereignty of other states and the lives of other citizens. It was perhaps his last major act as Secretary of State. But was this the reason for his dismissal? He's asking the question. Or even a last straw. The White House is insisting the decision to fire Tillerson has been made before his comments on Monday evening. That he was informed of the decision in early morning hours of Saturday before returning from a trip to Africa. But his statement from the top State Department spokesman Tuesday indicated that Tillerson had no advance warning of his termination beyond a heads up that Trump would tweet something. The spokesman, Steve Goldstein, had been fired for contradicting the White House. Democrats quickly issued a statement Tuesday alleging that Tillerson was fired for being too tough on Russian President Vladimir Putin. Secretary Tillerson's firing a profoundly disturbing precedent in which standing up for one's allies against Russian aggression is grounds for humiliating dismissal, said House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi. They need to make up their minds. Is hiring Tillerson Russia or is firing Tillerson Russia? Which one is it? Which one is it? Fact is, if you're looking at this, everything that these guys are saying is being filtered through a very specific lens. Donald Trump is colluding with Vladimir Putin, and because Donald Trump is colluding with Vladimir Putin, anything that takes place by definition has to be in some situation or in some way associated with him collaborating with Vladimir Putin. If he hires Rex Tillerson, it's because Rex Tillerson is an oil man that works for Vladimir Putin, in which case he's being hired because Vladimir Putin told him to hire it. If he's being fired, it's because Vladimir Putin didn't like what Rex Tillerson said about Vladimir Putin, in which case Donald Trump had to fire him. Please be smarter than what they're taking you to be. This is the lens that they're using to understand this. When Cenk Uygur is saying Nerf bombs, that the bombs they dropped in Syria weren't really bombs. They weren't really real attacks. They were Nerf bombs. They were soft bombs. They gave sparkles when they exploded. All of this stuff is being filtered through their lens of Russia and Trump. This video didn't mean to be long. This video went longer than I wanted to. But I'll leave it at that. Let's see. I'll take one or two comments. Chuck E. Cheese. It's always been the best part of Trump. The media wants to impale him for his views. Jamal made my wife a new woman. What? The Virgin Warrior 420. Jamal made my wife a new woman. I have no idea what that means. Pet hacker Bob Ramirez. Did you see the post about the paid Hillary bots on Twitter? I did. I did a video on that, Pat. I did a video on that. Yeah, absolutely. M99. What Trump is doesn't matter because he's just another Zionist puppet. How they dress him up matters not. Carl Malone. Carl Malone. I haven't heard that name in a while. What do you call a theory that can never be falsified no matter what happens? Yeah, right. Yeah. Yes, Carl. Yes. That's exactly what it is. I'm sorry. It took me a second to be like, what? I was like, maybe he's talking. Oh, no, he's talking about the Trump and Russia theory. Yeah. Everything that happens, it goes filtered through that lens. Everything that happens. All right. I am going to end this. I don't agree with what they said, but just looking at that, there's a reason for Rex Tillerson leaving. Yeah, I don't know why Rex Tillerson left, but they don't know either. For all I know, they could have said that he was leaving, beforehand. I have no idea. I do know the Russia stuff is nonsense and hysteria. Is it possible that Donald Trump has business dealings with Russia? Yeah, it's possible. And here's the thing. If they went after Trump for the emollients clause, I would understand that. Like, that would make sense to me. I don't want anybody monetizing or getting money off the presidency. I don't want anybody monetizing and getting money off the State Department. Hillary Clinton. I'm saying, though, how they're going after him is problematic. And everything is filtered through the exact same lens. Donald Trump works with Russia because Donald Trump works with Russia. Everything that Russia does, though Donald Trump does, has to have in some way connected to Russia. Donald Trump uses the toilet at 8 in the morning. It's because Vladimir Putin has a video that's going to be on Fox News that Donald Trump wants to see at 8 o'clock. So he gets up 30 minutes earlier to see it. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. It's always filtered through the lens of Trump and Russia. I mean, this hit home to me. I always use the Cenk Uygur bomb thing because that was the most amazing thing I've ever heard. Trump fires a missile attack at Syria, and his response is, those are fake bombs. Those are Nerf bombs. Those are Nerf bombs. The stuff that it hit didn't really matter. It's like, whatever. Virgin Mary 420. You can sleep with my wife anytime. I think you're talking about Mary Jane. I think you're talking about Mary Jane. That's funny. Well, here's an idea. Trump got famous saying, "You're fired." He's been firing a different person every week for the year. Yeah, he has. He has. He's just been getting his rocks off firing people. Yeah. All right. I'm going to end this. I have a few more coming up. I'm going to be doing these during the day. So, all right, guys. See you shortly.